So I fuel you so that you can never allow your self-esteem to collapse based on the way somebody else treats you? Or are you going to let this you and be super guarded and self-protected in life and not experience love because you're too scared to let anybody in?
Welcome back to Abed Podcast. This is episode 25. Today, our guest is someone who has talked about manifestation. I know, guys, before you come after me, I don't understand manifestation much, but our guest is here to talk about it. She took the manifestation in a totally new level. She's another also think positive and hope for the best kind of guru, if the guru comes as a right word. She have been in the, let's say, the psychology, mental, medical part of it. She will talk more about it. And she worked with a lot of top entrepreneur and Hollywood actors. We'll talk about more about this one as well. And coaching industry. Why she is here today? Because to be honest, manifestation has a lot of stereotypes. I don't understand it myself. So it's a good education session for myself. And we will discuss more in deep. Is manifestation is a way to give up life, or manifestation is going to be a way to escape from hard work? We will talk about it with our guest. So without further ado, Lenny, welcome to Abed Podcast. Leanne,
Thanks for
welcome.
having me, love.
Leanne, sorry, my apologies. Leanne, welcome to Abed Podcast.
That's all right. Thank you so much for having me, love.
No worries, no worries. For the people who doesn't know you, please introduce yourself to our audiences.
Yeah, so my name's Leanne Rose. My background is in psychotherapy and I have a degree in mental health nursing. But my business is solely linked to manifestation. So I define manifestation in terms of leveraging your consciousness to transform your reality. So really becoming a better version of you to transform your life is the best way to understand it. But there is a little bit of, cosmic stuff in there as well that I like to play with. So that's the bulk of what I do.
Interesting. Most people trying to do manifestation, and I've seen myself a lot of advertising of it. And honestly, they try to practice this manifestation to get their own dream life, if they are stuck on a certain situation, if they are frustrated from trying and failing. So they go, how can I say? It's the go-to kind of a solution, if you know what I mean. So I don't know if there's techniques to visualizing, using it as visualize it as with a vision board, maybe repeating affirmation and something, but there is a missing link here, and I wish to talk about it here with you. But let's start with the beginning. How did you came to this sphere of manifestation?
So suppose we really have to start right at the very beginning of my journey. So I started in the personal development kind of arena very early on. So I started in personal development as a 15-year-old. I had a really rough childhood. I grew up in foster care. And so I was, looking to heal probably a lot sooner than most people would. So I got into personal development, meditation, yoga, all of that kind of stuff very early on. which led me on a very spiritual journey. So although I talk about, the more scientific side of manifestation, the thing that really led me there was the spiritual aspect to it.
Okay.
I was really on a quest to find something find something bigger than this definition of, being human, because that at the time to me felt miserable. So I ended up on this quest to really transform my view of life from the inside out.
Hmm.
And that led me down various spiritual paths. I ended up becoming a mental health nurse, qualified in interpersonal psychotherapy as well. And really the main piece for me has been around empowering ourselves to feel better. That's always been the core piece for me. And amongst all of that, I discovered manifestation, I discovered the law of attraction, I discovered this idea that your thoughts create your reality. And I was really, really curious about it. But what I started to really notice with people that were moving in those spheres was this idea that the universe was the thing that was going to come in and save you. It was going to swoop in and save you, and all you had to do was sit on your meditation cushion and visualize it into being. And that somehow just didn't add up for me. And so really this, that missing piece that you talk about, I bet that's really it for me. And so that's the core piece that I really discovered was, rather than this idea of the universe coming to be your savior, I really took the spiritual teachings, oneness theory, all of that kind of stuff, and really ran with it from this perspective of, if all is one, then that means we are the universe embodied. And if we're waiting for something outside of ourselves to come and save us, then we're going to be waiting a hell of a long time. And so I ran with this notion that, what if we are the universe and the thing that we're waiting on is ourselves? And so when I started to really work with that perspective of things, my spiritual gift opened up, and the rest is history, as they say. That's really what led me down the path that I'm on today.
One of the messages here we're trying to emphasize in Abed podcast is helping people to break the cycle of failure when it comes to personal development, breaking out of their fear. Once you've been a psychologist nurse, is it correct to put it that way? As a terminology?
So the psychology behind breaking the
Psychology.
cycle of fear, yeah.
Exactly. Once you've been practicing that, what was the biggest, how can I say, the trigger for people to live on that cycle of failure?
So could you just say that bit again for me, love? Sorry, it broke up just a tiny bit.
No worries, no worries. Again, what we are trying to here to establish, identify what is the trigger for people to being stuck on that cycle of failure. So you have seen it in the medical field and how you try to treat it, people out of it. Before we jump to the trans-channeling and the manifestation part. So
Yeah.
let
So
us know a little bit
what,
from how did you saw it in that field at that time? Sorry.
so the psychology aspect of
Yeah.
things. So yeah, I worked with a lot of people, mental health nursing, and walk along the path of depression.
Yes.
When I studied as an interpersonal psychotherapist, I work with a lot of people with depression, helping them to really, recognize how to heal from the inside out when you're struggling with, mental illnesses like depression. And obviously, as you can imagine, people do go through real deep cycles of failure when they're, moving through what we call treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And there are small wins that happen, and there are big wins that happen.
True.
What I've noticed in the medical field is that there is still always this label that people are kind of attached to, that like, oh, I have depression, or oh, I have anxiety, or oh, I have this. So this idea of diagnosing people can be really helpful up to a point. And so you will see people making progress in treatment. Let's say we're doing some inner child healing, or let's say we are, doing a little bit of exposure therapy if they've got some anxieties, or we are, rewriting their internal kind of stories about life. But what I found is that as long as somebody experiences this idea that they have a diagnosis of a mental illness, it's very easy to just keep falling back in to this idea that they're never going to be free of it. And so what I actually found was that within the model that we currently work with, I believe personally, and if this is just me personally, there are a couple of other practitioners that are starting to believe in this way of thinking as well, is that our current medical models do actually set people up for failure, because constantly reinforcing this idea that there is something wrong with them, that they are broken in some way. So when we give a diagnosis, sometimes people can really experience that cycle of failure because it becomes a part of their identity, and then they don't know how to really move away from that, if that makes sense.
It's true, and I could see that. So some people they need just a small example to follow a certain path. So medication is one of them. Okay, and sometimes it's beyond medication. It's something that I've seen it in my life as actually. Sometimes it takes from you to change your mindset to a certain extent. People sometimes look at me and say, oh, come on, you can't be positive all the time. There is a medical background of it, your hormones, your etc. I said, it wouldn't harm to just adjust your mindset. It will not take that much effort. Even if you want to take medication, okay? Just try to change your mindset. Let your body heal from the inside with a kick from the medicine. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of people just gave up of the idea of trying other alternative solution except medication.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of research to say that, medication in and of itself can be helpful. There's also really nasty side effects that come with medication as well that, people don't really recognize, and I believe there's not that too much education around. But there's a lot of studies to say that science in conjunction with a talking therapy, alongside an alternative method, actually enhances the effectiveness of the medication in and of itself. I'm a huge believer in that if you're just going to medicate somebody, you are slapping a plaster on the problem. You're not actually addressing the core root issue that is, mental illness is an issue of the psyche. And so if you're not addressing the psyche and you're only addressing the physicality, you're just masking a problem. And in my experience, that ends up creating a worse problem further down the line, or it just numbs people out. And so rather than feeling, maybe like highly activated through anxiety, they then just feel really numb to life. And that becomes its own, issue in and of itself.
I can say the reason for that people so afraid from really trying to dig behind the truth is like you poking the horn's nest.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Because the courage of really putting your hands on the actual problem is too scary for them.
Absolutely. And this is why what I'm hoping to study in my PhD is really looking at the identity aspects rather than just deep diving into trauma. So there are some studies that talk about the fact that, talking around our problems can be helpful up to a degree, but quite often it's not feasible for some people. Quite often there's so much trauma locked into the body that we can't even think about, talking about it, let alone actually processing it properly. So I think one of the other core pieces that people don't recognize is that the fact that the body protects us from talking about our trauma. So there's a somatic aspect, and a large part of my work is working with the body, because you might think that you're willing to do the work, and you might think that you show up to do it, and you might think that, yeah, I'm ready to do it. You're forced into it maybe by a partner who's saying, you're emotionally unavailable, you need to do therapy or what have you. And your body will shut down. But it's what we're working with here is the idea that trauma forms the belief that we are not safe in the now moment. And it's actually very simple to work with. It's been, made out to be a huge thing because we don't really fully understand it. Many people don't fully understand it. But it's actually quite simple. When you can remind the body that in this now moment you are safe, it actually gets so much easier to work through and process trauma. But because many of our talking therapies and many of the things that we currently endorse as mental health professionals don't actually take a somatic approach, we're scaring people before we can actually fully dive in. And so that's why what I would really, really, really love to study more in detail, and I do this, very much so experimentally with clients that are ready to really go there, is how we can transform our identities from the inside out. Because quite often we can transform our identity in the present moment, and we don't have to dig up all the childhood trauma. We don't have to go into all of the nooks and crannies of the psyche that want to be protected, that don't want to be seen. And once you can start to strengthen the identity in the now, so believing more in yourself right now without having to dig up all your trauma, there is almost a safety net that starts to be built into the body, and we start to feel a little bit more confident, not only to do life in the now moment, but also to start to look back at the way we've experienced life before now and start to unpack it a little bit more, so that we feel like we actually can approach that rather than feeling like it's just a really scary thing and we just want to avoid it altogether.
Thank you for highlighting this point, because this is actually one of the points that one of the messages I tried to implement it with when dealing with such a situation like this: create a safety net or safe zone for people to talk about it, express, and etc. How difficult do you think establishing a safe zone with someone who's under pressure of a trauma, or he's trying to? Because this is the thing. It's a follow-up question as well. How far you dig deep on the trauma to make peace with it?
So obviously that's something that's really subjective because it's personal to everyone.
Sure.
And what I've found is that this is why I like to talk about the difference between healing and what I call remembrance.
Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So we have this fascination with human beings with like constantly needing to heal all the time. There's this idea that like, oh, we're broken, there's something wrong with us, we need to heal from all this trauma in our childhood. But what I've come to find is there is one constant of being human, and that's we all have trauma. Some of us, it's really, really huge, and there's war and genocide, and for some of us it's less huge, and it's our parents weren't emotionally available for us because they were going through a divorce or something like that. So subjectively they are not the same, and yet we experience them with the same degree of intensity because it's all relative, to our own individual experiences. And so what I've come to recognize is that the one constant of being human is that you are designed to fall in and out of what, scientists call regulation, but for layman terms, you're designed to sometimes feel good, sometimes not feel good. And our nervous systems are wired to get that flexibility. So it's not about feeling good all the time. It's about how you can deal with the times when you're not feeling good and how flexibly you can bring yourself back into feeling good no matter what you're experiencing. So the core piece that I suppose I'm really getting at here is it doesn't really matter how deep you dive into your trauma, and it doesn't really matter how avoidant you can be with your trauma. What matters, in my experience, is your experience of the now moment and your ability to not be run by your trauma and to actively and consciously decide how you want to feel each moment. So that's what my work really concentrates on. So rather than this idea that we are defined by our past, what I really like to concentrate on is who do you want to be in the now moment? You have every tool at your disposal right now. Our bodies are incredible. We have emotions we can work with. We have a mind that is incredible. Like, it is incredible, and we can shape things. And this is where I love, what's come before around manifestation was this idea that we can start to consciously direct our thoughts. And so, of course, some people use this to avoid digging into trauma. So that's the piece that you have to be really careful with. It's where are you using this active redirection in the now moment to avoid looking at something versus are you using this to really look at what is present in your body in the now and make a decision about how you're going to process and move through that to create a different outcome in the future. And what I've found is that the more skilled you are at doing the trauma work, so the more of it you've done in the past, the easier it gets to do this in the now moment, really speedily, really quickly. And so we get to have better results faster because we've built those skills of really shaping our nervous system and allowing ourselves to process what we need to process, but not getting stuck there. And what I found is that a lot of people get stuck in the trauma.
One of the reasons that the people, and this is a discussion I had previously with a couple of groups, saying that the reason that you need to make peace with that whatever trauma that you have faced is basically learn from it, and one, it will open your eyes to pick up the clues that you are going in the future to hit the same trauma again. So basically, making peace with it, that I wouldn't say it will shield you. It will upgrade your senses. It will upgrade your awareness about, okay, looks like I'm going to the same path again. So it prevents you from doing the same mistake over again. And this is what sometimes people, they do the same mistake all over, all again, and again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about getting to know yourself, isn't it? So, my philosophy on life is that life responds to who we are. Life is a reflection of who we are. We experience life through the lens of who we believe ourselves to be. And we all come in with stories, like set stories about what we believe is true. Some of us, it's, I believe I'm unworthy, or I believe I'll never be good enough, or I believe I have to, work really, really hard in order to be valued. Sure. And so if these stories are alive within you, life is constantly going to give you opportunities to play that out. And the more you learn to recognize that happening, the less you're going to respond to that older version of you, and you're going to start to write new stories in. So let's say, for example, you're in a partnership, and let's say you're in a new partnership, and everything feels really, really good, everything feels really lovely, and you're kind of, you're just starting to come down from the honeymoon phase, and you start to pick up on the fact that your partner maybe isn't valuing you. But what's really happening is that you have a belief that you are not valued. That's a core belief probably that's maybe come up from childhood, or maybe it's even a generational thing. Maybe it's even a societal thing, as there's lots of things that we take on, as our gender, our sex, our race, our, family lineage. There's lots of things that come into this that isn't just about our personal history. But let's say you have a story running that you are not valued by men in particular, or by women in particular. Mm-hmm. And so your partner starts to now show up in a way that supports that belief. And so there's two ways that we respond to this. Either we have our blinkers on, and all we can see is I'm not valued, I'm not valued, I'm not valued. And so we start to speak to our partner in that way. We start to respond in that way. So how are we going to respond? We're going to be really, snappy. We're going to be gripey. We're going to be like, why are you not valuing me? We're going to have a bit of an attitude about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's going to cause our partner to show up even more. in that, in that way. But if we're aware of, our stories, we're aware of how that's made us respond to people in the past, we can then change that behavior, and we can start to respond to our partner, which then brings out a different version of them. And so when I think about manifestation, I'm not thinking about, praying to some, overlord that's going to grant us our wishes. What I'm really looking at is those day-to-day, moment-to-moment shifts in perception, shifts in the way that we respond to life. And so life responds differently to us because we're putting out something very different, and we're being really conscious about how we're redirecting our energy.
It's time to address the elephant in the room. You're ready?
I'm ready.
Manifestation, is it real or just a lazy path for people just to dream?
So, great question. So, manifestation is, in my opinion, very real, but it's very misunderstood. And so you get a lot of people that think manifestation is about handing over the reins to the universe, or to spirit, to God, whatever you want to, we all have different beliefs and we have to be respectful of that. But there is this idea that if I just feel good enough, or if I just meditate enough, then I can meditate my way into this, lovely life. And we get very, talking about, cycles of failure, you're going to feel like a failure very, very quickly if that's what you're practicing, because there's no self-actualization within that process. You're not having to really leverage your own energy field. You're giving your power away. And if that's how you are doing life, then really all you're going to get back is this idea that there's not enough, not enough, not enough, because that's how you're coming at life. So to give you a really tangible example, before I really, crossed into this perception of manifestation, and I was really looking at, the old law of attraction teachings, I was, meditating, doing the things, believing that, money was just going to magically transform, land on my lap one day or show up at the door. And I'm not saying that it can't happen like that. But what I'm saying is if your belief system is, I just have to, think about it enough, then it will come. The energy field that you're putting out is that right now, I'm not satisfied. So if you think about that, like if we're thinking about reality as responding to us, what you're putting out is right now isn't good enough. I'm waiting for something to come in and save me. So if we're looking at manifestation as life is responding to you and to your energy field and to who you are, then all life can give back to you and all you can then become aware of is where life is not enough right now. Mm-hmm. And so eventually over time, that's just it's gonna make you feel really hopeless. It's gonna make you feel really upset. It's gonna make you feel like, what's the point? And that's kind of where I got with it. There was this, huge story of like, well, the universe isn't coming to save me, because that's not how it works. But when I really started to plug into, well, what if I am the universe, and what if it's about really consciously directing my energy field for the love and the joy of it, for the love of feeling good in the now moment, not because something better is going to drop in the future, but because it feels good to consciously shift how I feel right now and just allow that to be enough. And so when I really started to, move from that perspective in life, what I began to recognize was that there was opportunities everywhere. And when I was waiting for the universe to come save me, there's that, what's that? There's a story, isn't there, in the Bible that talks about when there's a guy on a roof waiting to be saved by God, and there's all these different things that come along to save him, and he says no to them because he's waiting for God to come and save him. And then when he gets to, heaven or what have you, I think this is like the Christian ideology, God says to him, I sent you 3 different ways of getting off that roof. And he's like, oh, I didn't realize, because he was looking for something, he'd labeled, oh, well, God's going to save me in this really like
Yeah.
really create a really massive way. But it's like when we've got these blinkers on that, you know, it has to look a certain way, the universe is going to deliver salvation, we don't realize that there is a richness of opportunity just waiting for us to capitalize on it. And we're
Absolutely.
not looking for that. We're in that really victim mentality of somebody needs to come save me. So what I found was that, you know, really starting to move from this space of, oh, I get to make it happen. There are all these beautiful ways of opportunity coming to greet me. And now I was open to them and now I could see them. Like the blinkers were off and now I could really, you know, make of life what was there. And that's really what ended up in, you know, me having the life that I've got today, which I just adore.
Amazing. So, in summary, you have not surrendered your power just for the sake of want someone to come to save you, which is just only the positive thoughts. Maybe this is number one. Second, your approach is coming from many, not scarcity. Being happy where I am, I would like to get more, instead of I'm not happy where I am and I want more.
Yeah,
Did I summarize it in a good way?
absolutely, absolutely. So there is this beautiful paradox that happens where we are complete in the now moment.
Yes.
That's really, you know, the juiciness that we're going for. Like, and you know, some people call this the flow state or growth mindset.
Yes.
And it's, you know, there's reason that we talk about it in all these different things because it works. We just
It's
speak in
true.
different languages around it.
It's true.
But it's, you know, the core concept is right now I've got everything I need. I feel complete and I'm excited to create more. So, you know, that's really where the passion comes in it for me. When I think about us as beings, my belief is that we are creator beings and that we're here to create. So it's not about shaming somebody for wanting more. We're wired to want more. We're wired to evolve. We're wired to want to create and transform and, you know, grow. That's what we're wired for. But that doesn't mean that in the now moment, we can't feel incredible for what's already here and what we've already built.
Question for you, and this is off topic. People sometimes people sometimes tends to go untraditional way to seek happiness. What is happiness for you?
Oh, that's a really lovely question. What is happiness for me? Happiness for me is knowing that I always trusting myself to be able to feel how I want to feel moment to moment and being able to see evidence of momentum towards the future that I want to build. That's what's happy. Oh, and I have to add in here because without this, it's nothing. Feeling deeply connected to the world around me. That feels like a really important piece of happiness for me.
Interesting. Because I have not seen anyone describing happiness as the way how you describe it. Unpack that, please.
Okay, so you know they say, don't they, that you know happiness is an inside job. Happiness is not. It's a journey, not a destination.
Because happiness is linked sometime with joy. You know what I mean? This is the missing link. People like happiness is linked with joy, happening linked with satisfaction, happening with being positive about yourself.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. I do. I really do. And I think happiness is relational. I think happiness is relational to like yourself. I
Okay.
don't believe I believe you could put somebody, you know, in like you could give them the most phenomenal life, but if they don't have a good relationship with themselves and with the world around them, I don't believe happiness would be accessible. Because happiness is something that we feel internally. You know, it's something that is, and I've been there, you know, there were some really dark times in my life where I really did not like myself. Multiple different reasons, you know, teenage girls.
Yeah.
We, you know, hate on our bodies, all of that kind of stuff. And I was surrounded by, there were times when, on paper it looked like I should be phenomenally happy, and I wasn't. I was deeply, deeply, deeply unhappy, because the one thing I used to say to my patients when I was a mental health nurse was, the one thing that you cannot be rid of. So you can take yourself all over the world, but the one thing that you will never be rid of is yourself. You will take yourself into every interaction, every scenario, every single life experience. And the way you hold, honor, love, believe in yourself, everything that your self perception is, that is going to taint every experience you have. And so, if your self perception is not a positive one, I don't believe you can find happiness anywhere. Even if you find a person who's willing to love you to the ends of the earth, you'll never be able to receive that love fully, because you're seeing it through the lens of, I'm unlovable, so how could you love me?
That's interesting. That's interesting because, again, you worked with a lot of corporate people, and these people tend to have the joy, the happiness from the sense of accomplishment. We have done this agreement, we have done this deal, oh, I have done six figures, XYZ, I've sold my book, ta 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 ta. Why they need manifestation? Or, sorry, why they need your help with the model that you created?
So, what you often find with people that are extremely high achievers, they're doing really, really well in life. They've got, the multi-million dollar house, they've got the family, they've got the body, but they've also got this incessant need to prove themselves. And so, where that comes from is, essentially this core belief that they're not enough just as they are. And so creating more, getting more money, doing more things, doing all the things, like,
Is is it the competitiveness?
So competitiveness, yes, but competitiveness can be fun when you really trust yourself. Competitiveness can be really a fun thing.
Could be.
But if you don't love yourself, competitiveness can be I need to prove myself. And if this is when you find that those individuals their business runs them rather than they run their business,
True.
because
Yeah.
they're constantly trying to fill a hole. They're like, if I get enough stuff, if I prove myself, if I've got more trophies, then
It's
I'll
true.
somehow feel, yeah,
It's,
it's like
it's
the
true.
external validation.
It's true, and I could see this in every paradigm of life where competitiveness it's part of it. Take it in business, sport, relationship, travel, whatever it is. When it comes to competitiveness and comparison, this is like really it can be good, encouraging people to push forward, push limits, explore more, but it could turn poison.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I have a core understanding about the universe, in that competitiveness is an energy, it's a frequency.
Yeah,
And sometimes we're in that real feel good state, and sometimes we're not. And so, it's not always about this idea that somebody is consistently, feels really high self-worth. We fall in and out of it. And so somebody that, one day might be really nourished by competition, the next day they might have slipped into what I call our unbalanced masculine, which is where we're really trying to prove ourselves, and that it's coming from that survival state. And the next day you might feel incredibly overwhelmed by it and burnt out by it, because you're doing it for the, quote unquote, the wrong reasons.
this is what I've started my career with the sales, and sales in general, it is the most ruthless, competitive environment anyone can work, because it is a ruthless competition. It's the go, go, go mode. It's attack mode all the time. And I saw people broke down, and I saw people really got burned. And even the people close to me, they said, you have chose the most fatal career or path in life. You've just how can I say? You give her the sentence for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I said no. It's yes, it's a highly competitive, competition is very high, and it drains energy from you. But if you take all of this, harness it, use it as a fuel to develop yourself, build your character, I think you'll persevere.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the difference, isn't it, Abid? That's the difference between, two people that are in the same environment. One person thrives, one person, really doesn't, crashes and burns. And it's about our perspective around what's happening. Like, are you going to use it as fuel or are you going to cave under the pressure?
Because one of the things that always it was, how can I say, the demon in the sales, how you gonna deal with rejection?
Yeah. Yeah.
How many broken souls you have seen, they could not handle rejection.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Can you?
at that time, I was like saying, either I know I need to learn how to handle it, or I should exit that career.
Yeah. And you think about how much that's nourished you in, just in your personal life as well. I bet, we face rejection all the time. And if we take that really personally and we like drown from it, then we don't go out and live life to the fullest. But if you've had that practiced experience and you're like, no, I'm just going to get used to it, I'm going to learn how to move forward from it. I'm willing to bet that that's also helped you in, in your intimate relationships or, even in friendships when we can
Sure.
have those micro rejections. That's probably easier for you to deal with now.
One of the Everyone has a trigger in his life, okay, where he decide to, I need to change now. For example, adapting the positive mindset or the growth mindset. Let's put it this way. For me personally, to adopt the growth mindset, it's an experience with my first manager ever in the corporate world. It was in 2001. It was like immediately this. It was, how can I say? It was literally. I was on my peak when it came to success on that career. I was young. I was 23, and immediately I saw my dreams crashes because of him. In 1 second, just all my dreams crashed on the table. And at that
Mm.
moment, I said, no, I went back to my office, of course, furious, just tornado on my head. I was young, and that was just like literally a slap on the face. And I said, you know what? Growth mindset is the way going forward. What is your story?
I love that story. And it's, testament to your character.
Let's go.
So my story would be, so I have two. The first was, the meeting point for myself with depression when I found myself just constantly giving excuses for why I couldn't show up to life. There was just one moment where I just caught myself and I was like, what are you doing?
What was the reason that you've been in depression? I mean, just without going in details, if it's up to you.
Yeah, so just generally my rough childhood, there was just lots and lots of stuff coming up around stories around why, the world couldn't be trusted and all of that kind of stuff. And mainly I just didn't feel like I could show up in the way that I wanted to. I was scared of failing. That was the main thing, I think. And
Yeah.
depression was one of those things. It gave me an excuse not to try, if that made sense. So it was like, well, if I don't even try, then I'll never fail. So it was almost like a way to dim myself down so that I would never have to deal with failure, so to speak. And so there was that moment when I really realized, like, pack that in. You're going nowhere if you you keep doing that, and you're just going to reiterate this idea that you're a victim to life, and that's not true. Let's just change the way you think about things. And yeah, everything changed from that point. But the most notable one was when I experienced a betrayal in my relationship.
Okay.
And I remember really feeling like, my whole self-worth came crashing in. And there was this idea of like, he chose somebody else. Like what are you gonna make that mean about you? Are you gonna make that fuel you? so that you can never allow your self-esteem to collapse based on the way somebody else treats you? Or are you going to let this you and be super guarded and self-protected in life and not experience love because you're too scared to let anybody in? And so that was a real defining moment for me when I recognized that I could either choose to lock my heart away and never experience, intense, intimate connection again because I never let anybody in, or I could choose to bolster my self-worth so much and go on a journey of real self-trust and self-mastery that no matter what happened in my external world, I would always know that I could count on myself. And that was what I did. And that was really the birthplace of my work. And that's now what I help other people to do. It's like, no matter what happens in your external world, you know that you can trust yourself to deal with that situation no matter what.
That was the core for you to build the manifestation 5D diagram.
Yeah. The
Okay.
manifestation stuff.
Talk to us about it a little bit in detail. I would like to know about this one, to be honest. Go for it.
Yeah. So you know what actually started it, which was really interesting. So the COVID vaccinations.
Yeah.
So I was working in the NHS at the time. And I'm a huge advocate of each to their own. Like, if you wanted to get the vaccine, incredible. But it got to the point where they were threatening to sack us if we didn't get it. And so the reason I got really upset about that was because I knew that there were lots of patients of mine that would feel very uncomfortable about getting it. And if they were going to force us to get it, then they were going to force, at some point down the line, they were going to force our patients to get it. And so I really took a stand around that because I was very upset about it, bodily autonomy and all of that. And in the end, the way that we were treated as a result of that, there were a couple of us that really took a stand around it because it just wasn't right the way people were being treated. And in the end, I thought, you know what? Bugger your job, you can keep it. I don't want it. I'm going to start my own business. And so that's how it all started. I see it now as the universe really pushing me in a really juicy way to be like, right, come on, now's the time. So I started the business not really knowing what I was going to do. So I was a trained yoga teacher and meditation instructor at the time. I thought I'll do something with that. And what ended up happening was that this spiritual gift came online. So, I'm not too sure about how your audience feel about spiritual gifts and all of that, Abed. So I'll kind of keep that bit a little bit kind of brief, if you like. And they can obviously, If you're curious about all of that, you can come and check me out on Instagram. Sure. But essentially, what the spiritual gift really allows me to do is harness ancient wisdom and really put it to practice, really put it into use. And what I started learning from this spiritual gift was about how we are interconnected. We're not separate. We think that we're these separate human beings that are living these separate lives, but in reality, everything is interacting with each other. We're constantly influenced by one another all of the time, mostly subconsciously. And so I started to understand how I could become more aware of how I was being influenced by energy out there, and how I could become more aware of how I could have more of a positive influence on the people around me through shifting my energy. And that was what I learned to do. I learned to harness my energy field. So I talk about this in 4 energy bodies, which is our physical body, our emotional body, obviously where we experience all our emotions, our mental body, which is our mind. And the really interesting thing that I talk about is our spiritual body. So this operates on the theory of oneness. Have you heard of the theory of oneness, Abed? Everything is one?
Not really. Explain it to us.
So there's this idea that all is one, that everything is interconnected, and that we're not separate. Mm-hmm. So I like to think of us as individual cells within a huge living organism. I think of the universe as the one living organism, and we are individual cells, and we're all talking to each other and working together without ever really thinking about it, without ever really, understanding. So let's say the cell is doing, its thing in our bodies. The heart cells are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. What they don't realize is how much that really beautifully influences what the liver cells are doing or what the brain cells are doing. But it's busy being a heart cell. So when I talk about our spiritual body, what I'm talking about is actually the world around us, that, nature, other people, that we're all interconnected, and the way that we interact and the way that we respond to the world around us is also a huge part of our own experience of reality. And so, the best way to put this is that I found a way to leverage and harness our use of for all four of those energy bodies to not only transform my own life, not only, make sure that I was living a life that felt more abundant, that felt more free, that felt more joyous, that felt more loving, but that also positively influences the world around me. Because I don't believe that we can be truly happy and truly in love with life if we are not having that positive influence on those around us, and we're not giving back somehow. Because for me, it's all interconnected. And so if I'm taking from you in order to give to me, that's not gonna work, because we're interconnected. So if there's something that you're being, taken from, then that's gonna take from me in some way. So that's another real key part of what I teach, is that interconnectedness with the world around us.
That's absolutely right. I can see it in the business world. If you have a proper mentor, he will be a giver more than the receiver. That's why everyone works with him. He will get that positive energy and influence, it will be more, how can I say, improving the environment around it. So I resonate with this. Again, not from the manifestation part, but again from the part. Because I'll tell you why. People fear from everything.
Yeah.
The biggest fear I can see people is getting out of the comfort zone of the box. Let's put it this way. When you ask people to open up their subconscious, they will struggle. Because they're going to open Pandora box.
Yeah. Scared of what they're going to find.
How do you make it easier for them?
So I teach a really, really basic framework that's very, very useful. And it talks about the four core energies that we are built upon. One of which is a protective part of self. So there's a part of you that's literally hardwired to stop you opening Pandora's box. So that's the part of you that's very self-protected. It doesn't want to go digging. Doesn't want to find out different bits. But it's also programmed to stop you expanding. It wants to keep you where you are. It wants to keep you safe. It doesn't care that you're unhappy where you are.
So in computer language, that's a safe mode.
Yeah. Think of it that way. So it's a safe mode. It's like, we're going to hold you here because we know how to deal with what's here. It's safer. It's safer if none of the variables change. I can keep you safer if you're here, if you're logged in.
Okay.
It doesn't care that you feel stagnant. It does not care. It just wants to keep you safe. So I like to think of this as an overbearing parent.
Okay.
And when we can start to think about this, it's like you might feel like, okay, physically I'm safe, but at the soul level, I am drowning because I'm not growing. I'm not expanding. I'm not having new experiences. I'm not exploring. There's no sense of adventure. I'm just stuck. And to me, that's the worst kind of hell. And so what I like to say to people is stay there a little bit. Stay there for a little bit, and pretty much sooner or later, when you stop resisting, eventually you will get fed up yourself and you will want to go looking for the things that make you feel better. So my advice is always, don't fight the overbearing parent at first. Just allow it to be there. Because if you're fighting with it, you're preoccupied. And so that's going to be a waste of energy. If you allow it, if you have that overbearing part of you to be like, okay, fine, we're going to stay in this safety zone. We're going to stay in this safe mode. We're just going to stay here. I'm not going to fight you. I'm just going to allow it to be. Sooner or later, there's going to be a drive in your
Mhm.
system. You're going to get really, really fed up of being stuck. And because you haven't been fighting this part of you, now you've got this energy that's been storing up, and now you're going to have impetus to actually want to move. So my advice is always, don't fight where you're at. Be with it, but listen to your own desires. So when you start to feel that nudge of, I'm getting really bored of being stuck right now, that's when you can start to be constructive around, okay, so how do I get unstuck in the most energy efficient way? So how do I feel better without going to war with myself?
Mhm.
And what you tend to find is that by that point, you're ready. When there's a cusp point that happens, I bet, where we like the idea of change and there is this desire that we want to change, but we're not quite ready. We're
Mhm.
not quite ready to do the things we need to do to make those changes. And maybe that means, we need to leave a relationship, or we need to start a new job, or we need to learn some new skills. We're going to have to put some hard work in. And so our overbearing parent, that part of us that's really protective, that safe mode kicks in when we know there's a change we need to make, but we're not quite ready to make it. And so if we allow that to kind of sit in the system for long enough, eventually we'll get so bored of being stuck that we'll decide to make the changes we need to make.
This is exactly what happened to me. I opened a company, training company with a partner of mine, which is, I know this guy for good 10, 15 years. So we decided to open a training company post-COVID because training shifted from physical training up to e-learning stuff platform. So we started that, and good, everything was good. 2, 3 years down the line, up to end of 2022, early 2023, we reach a point that we need to scale. Obviously, we need to go forward. We need to step to the next level. And at that moment, it's exactly what I found out. My message with this company, it was different than the message of my partner. As my partner's message was retirement and relax, and my message was growth and going forward. So it's
Mm.
exactly, I reached that point where it is the fighting of, this is my baby. All the hard work, shall I let it go or not? It's exactly what is the point you mentioned it. It was that, what did you say, the parents? I forgot the word.
Yeah, the overbearing parent.
Overbearing parents. So it took me 6 months time. I remember it took me 6 months time, and I said, you know what? No, I'm going forward. Thank you very much. This chapter is over. But exactly, it took me 6 months to build that notion that, you know what? If you did it once, you can do it. If you succeeded once, you can do it again. It's time for you to move forward. But the problem is, some people, they choose the self-destruction path and stay where they are. And then
Yeah,
it's only a free fall from there on.
absolutely. Absolutely. And what I'd say about that is that driving, that driver that drives some of us forward to then go and take action. What I would argue is that then that same energy is still there, it's still in the system, but it collapses inwards. And
Yeah.
so rather than experiencing, that impetus and drive to like move forward, there's this heavy kind of self-critic that comes online of like, why didn't you? Why didn't you do this? And you should have moved there and you should have done this. And eventually that you're kind of beaten down by yourself.
It's true. It's
And
true.
so I would say, if it quite often it feels like the easiest thing not to take action on our dreams, but I would say it's actually far easier to take action, because if you don't, the turmoil and hell that you will put yourself through if you betray yourself is just not worth it. It's not worth it. I've been there. It's not worth it.
It's true. Where the time flies, where the time flies. It was already almost out of time. Before we ending, before this is very interesting and actually it's eye opener. What was your wildest transformation case study that you ever seen with a client of
So
yours?
yeah, so I had this individual. She was already making, really good money. So she was making $150,000 a month anyway. After 6 months of working with us, she was hitting consistent $1 million months.
A month.
And
Okay.
yes, absolutely crackers. Um, and that's I like to talk about this example because
Sure.
people identify with the numbers and all of that kind of stuff. But the most radical transformation about this individual was that she went from somebody that was, really disconnected from her family, really quite disconnected from her body, and just was really just living for her business, to a complete internal shift around where her family became the most important thing in her life, and suddenly she had all of this more free time to actually spend with them. She started feeling safer in her own body. She was dealing with trauma from childhood and from early on really effortlessly, in a way that wasn't like labored and like hard to deal with. And she became more joyous and more vibrant, and she actually shifted physically. You could tell that she looked younger, she looked more free in her own system. You could see that she was laughing more, and she was just way more in touch with life. And so inevitably that then has an effect in our external world, in that like all these beautiful opportunities opened up for her. Her brain started working more dynamically, so she was able to leverage things that she wasn't leveraging beforehand, which exploded her business and exploded her income. And it just really is testament to, when we shift from the inside out, change can be so immediate and so dramatic and so across the board when we know what we're doing. And that's when we really leverage, energy from the inside out. The world must respond differently to you because you're responding differently to the world. So that's my favorite example to give.
Amazing. With this podcast, the message of Abed podcast is leaving, with every episode, we're trying to leave the audiences with some, how can I say, practices or action steps, so people can really go back to their life and do some action steps that help them to create a change, or how can I say, to create a notion of change. So what could be the takeaways for our audiences today to create some kind of, if it's a daily practice that they can do to start to creating a change, whether it is under the transformation channeling mindset or the manifestation?
So I like to call this practice present moment mastery. And that's, we were speaking to that piece of, it doesn't really matter how much you dig into your trauma. What matters is how you respond to life moment to moment. So my favorite practice to do with people, and you can do this at any time. Anytime you start to feel yourself feeling disappointed by life, whether you're feeling disappointed about yourself or you're feeling disappointed about your external circumstances, what I want you to ask yourself in that moment is, what do I believe I am lacking right now? What is it that I believe is missing? But I don't want you to think about the external pieces. I want you to think about what is missing inside of me. What is it that I want to feel right now that I feel I can't access because life doesn't look a certain way? So let's say you want to feel more loved. Let's say you want to feel more success. Let's say you want to feel more joy. And you're going to evidence to yourself in that moment, how can I feel more of this thing right now? And you're going to get really creative about how you can feel more of that feeling right now. So let's say, for example, you want to feel more love. Let's say your relationship's going to pot and you want to feel more love in the now moment. You're going to ask yourself, what can I do right now that's going to make me feel a tiny bit more loved in this moment? You might want to give yourself a cuddle. You might want to go and hug the dog. It doesn't have to be a huge, big thing, but these micro steps of self-trust, you evidencing to yourself that you can feel how you want to feel no matter what. The more you practice this, the more self-trust you're going to have, the more resilience you're going to build, and the more you're going to feel equipped to deal with life. The more you feel equipped to deal with life, the more you're going to go looking for opportunities, and then the more opportunities you're going to take and the more success you're going to have.
With a bombshell, I think it's time to end this episode. Thank you so much for the time. It was amazing. Thank you very much for the time you gave us and gave our audiences to open their eyes. Honestly, me myself, I was not that much understand. I need to do more homework to understand what's manifestation, to be honest, and really it could be something that we need to use. I have no idea, but really, thank you very much for the time that you've given us, and to our audiences. I know this episode could be controversial, probably give you a new whole perspective about what you can do to align your mindset and your energy towards your end goal. So we will share all your socials and website on the end on the video description, so you can check her work and see what her model is all about. And of course, as always, if you found someone who knows in your circle looking for some inspiration how to really change his life, this episode for him. Share it with him, give it a like, and until I see you next time, I'll see you. Keep winning, keep pushing the boundary, and keep the winning mindset. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much.